Alright, audio's going, video's going. Hello and welcome, my name is Eric, and today I'm going to be teaching you the difference between vibrance and saturation relative to Photoshop. So, here I have an image that I took a while back, and then I added a vibrancy adjustment layer on here, which if you just go down here, you go to Vibrance, and there you go. And here we have two sliders, Vibrance and Saturation. Saturation, as you probably already know, is the amount of color present in a specific color. So if we take the saturation all the way up, you can see it just goes, increases all that. If we go all the way down to 0, then we have a black and white. Vibrance, though, is a little bit different. So what Vibrance attempts to do is normalize the saturation levels. So at 0, each of the saturation levels in your image are just whatever they are. If you slide this up, it will increase the saturation of the lower saturation colors to equal whatever the highest saturation is present in your image. Whereas if you go lower, it'll take whatever the higher saturated elements are and bring them down to the lowest saturated elements in the image. So it's all relative to the saturation levels present in your image. So this is actually a really good way to see what is oversaturated in your images. If you're ever editing or retouching a portrait or really anything, and you want to know if your saturation levels are too high, which when that happens, it can kind of look weird when you print it or on some screens as well. You can take the vibrancy all the way down, saturation all the way up. Wait, no, I had that backwards. No, I had that right. Oh, this video is totally falling apart. What did I do? Do you go vibrancy down? Saturation up? Yeah. So one nifty way to know if you're I'm just going to try and run through this again. Hello and welcome, my name is Eric, and today I'm going to be teaching you the difference between vibrance and saturation in Photoshop. So here I have an image that I took a little while back, and I added a vibrance adjustment layer, which you can do that just by clicking on this guy here and going to vibrance. And then over here we have two sliders. We have vibrance and saturation. Saturation, as you probably know, takes the colors that you have and either increases the amount of color in them or decreases it all the way down to being black and white. Vibrance, though, has a little bit different of a behavior. What Vibrance does is it will attempt to normalize the colors in your image, more specifically the saturation levels in your image. So at 0, if I take this up, what that's doing is it's taking any colors that are not as saturated, it will bring them up to the most saturated value in your image. Similarly, if I go down, it will take whatever the higher saturated elements are and bring them down to the saturation level of whatever the lowest values are. So it's always relative to the colors and saturation levels that you have in your image. Now this is particularly useful if you are ever retouching a portrait or really anything and you want to check to see if your saturation levels are too high. This can matter if you're printing and on some websites or some screens. So what you can do is you can bring your vibrance all the way down, take your saturation all the way up, and if you see color, that means that it's too saturated. So what you can do is you can then take a hue saturation adjustment, kind of bring that down, and then what you do is you wouldn't, I mean, if your entire image is too saturated, then yeah, you could totally do that, but really what you would do here is just switch this layer mask to be black, and then you would paint in white where your saturation levels are too high. So basically we take this just to show you a quick demo. And then actually I should bring that down there. Now if we take that out, we can see now that our blue and our red are actually of similar saturation. This isn't a great example. So I would definitely agree it doesn't really work with this image because image just looks better with higher saturation, but that is something to keep in mind. And when you are retouching skin tones specifically, you don't want them looking too saturated or too dull. And so this will help normalize everything out. Hope you did learn something. If you do have any questions, definitely leave them in the comments below. Always remember to love yourself, and I cannot wait to share the next video with you, which should be tomorrow.